So the Senate passes through the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. So what's the appetite in the House? Let's check with Congresswoman Lisa McClain out of Michigan's 10th District. Congresswoman, good afternoon to you.
How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you. Thanks for taking some time with us. So talk to me about, I guess I want to start with the appetite for this in the House. I know that obviously there will be some of your Democrat colleagues that will be on board with this. But from your perspective, what are some of the flaws in this bill?
Well, I'm searching the 2,700 pages to find out what's right with the bill. And I'm just going to be straight with you. This is a $1 trillion infrastructure bill that shouldn't even be called infrastructure. 10% of the bill is going to roads and bridges. 10% of $1 trillion is going to roads and bridges. Now, we do have $65 billion going to broadband. However, of that $65 billion, there's a lot of strings attached. For example, one of the strings attached is we have to make sure that we give prisoners high-speed broadband. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because they really need that, and they rank top of the list to make sure they get broadband. At the end of the day, Chris, I'm going through some of the stuff in this infrastructure bill, and it is nothing but a socialist wish list. Can someone explain to me how $2 million for bee-friendly landscaping is infrastructure? $50 million to combat weeds. Weeds. We're going to spend $50 million in an infrastructure bill to combat weeds. How about we just do an infrastructure bill? I mean, we have $7.5 billion for charging stations for electric vehicles. Just a crazy suggestion. Why don't we get the electric vehicles and get broadband before we worry about the charging stations for $7.5 billion? Listen, our spending is completely out of control.
Yeah, I mean, look, and at the end of the day here, there's a lot of waste here, a lot of waste. There's a lot of fat in this bill, and unfortunately, $1 trillion packages have become the norm in D.C. I know it's not something you're in favor of, but I'm curious to know, from your perspective with your party and your caucus, were you disappointed to see I guess I don't want to say the bipartisan relationship, because I think everybody would like, everybody to work together to find some common ground. But the nature in which this bill was crafted in the Senate with so much Republican support, were you surprised by that?
I can't believe it. Yes, I was surprised. I can't believe that I can't believe Republican or Democrats would vote for this bill. Listen, our spending is out of control. And at some point in time, that is going to come at a cost. We have the debt ceiling we're going to deal with. Now Bernie Sanders is going to give us a bill of $3.5 trillion on reconciliation for his wish list. So I would expect a bipartisan non-support of all this frivolous spending. At some point in time, we spend 117% of our GDP. We can't pay our bills. We can't pay our bills as Americans. This wouldn't work in your household. I would expect bipartisan support to not pass the bill. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Coming from a business background, I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
I know Senator Rick Scott of Florida has said, that we are now living outside our means, and I think it's a pretty interesting quote, because again, I point to these multiple $1 trillion bill packages, and it does kind of feel like we're living outside of our means at this point, doesn't it?
We don't need to feel like it. It's an actual fact. When you spend 117% more than what you produce, that's outside your means. That's factual. And at some point in time, there's going to be a day of reckoning. It's coming. The day of reckoning is coming. We've got to get our spending under control.
This is expected to, I believe the Congressional Budget Office projected that this bill, as constructed now, would add roughly $256 billion to this deficit over a 10-year span. You've got Chuck Schumer very excited about this. I got to imagine Nancy Pelosi will be on board with this. I know that she won't take up the measure until a broader budget bill has passed the House. I believe that's coming out of her office. The frustration I think a lot of us face outside of D.C. is it's the waste, it's the spending, it's the fat, and when you see the T after the one, it's just becoming something that is it's something we're seeing too often in D.C. And again, I don't know where all of this is money coming. Nobody has been able to tell me where this money's coming from.
Well, no one's been able to tell me where the money's coming from either, and that's because they don't have a solution on how to pay for the bill. But this is the issue. This is the issue. Nobody talks about how we're going to repay it. And with nobody cares about it. The progressives don't care about how to pay for it. My goodness sakes, if you bring that up, you are like Satan. I mean, we saw this with the eviction moratorium. God forbid we begin to hold people accountable to pay their bills. What is going on? We have to get some sanity, some logic, some simple, basic economic principles back, or we are going to lose control of this entire country.
Do you feel that there is a broader effort here to continue benefits, to continue to allow people to I don't know, skate is the wrong word. I don't think that's a fair description, but continuing benefits where people are becoming more dependent on the government, and this is certainly part of that.
What other reason would there be? If you want to get people dependent, that's exactly what's happening right now with the enhanced unemployment. Look at all of the policies. Listen, my mom taught me an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And I teach my children, please don't be dependent. Don't be dependent on me as your parent. Don't be dependent on your spouse. And please, God forbid, don't be dependent on the government. And that's what's happening right now. And people, we have got to wake up and see what's going on. There's no free lunch. We're printing money. That's why it costs so much for a gallon of gas. Inflation's out of control.
I fear you're right. But I guess let me ask you this in the couple of seconds I have left here. How do you see this thing shaking out in the House?
You know, it's going to be really interesting, especially since we're coming up with the debt ceiling. I know how I would play it. How I would play it is we're not spending money unless we have some pay-fors. And we're going to pay our bills. And if that means we have to make some cuts, then I guess that means we have to make some cuts. Life's about choices. I think it's going to be very, very interesting what we see in the House, because we've already spent so much money. I mean, I've been in the district. These local municipalities have COVID relief money that they don't know how to spend. They haven't spent it yet. So I think you're going to see some arguments and some fights, some debates. Let me put it in maybe a more positive fashion. And I hope we see some logic on how are we going to pay for this. Are we really going to saddle our children and our grandchildren with all of this debt? Really, this is the government that we want to leave, and this is the country that we want to leave to our children. 30+ trillion in debt with.
Congresswoman McClain, I fear you're right.